Back to Miller. Oh my goodness.
Herbert.
Sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pig Swap Media. This is your host, Ryan Coyle. As always, continuing on today with our college football preview series. I think by the time this episode might come out, that week 0 might be already in the book. So this is a big time episode to get you ready for week 1, one of the premier teams in college football this year, checking in at number 9 in the AP poll, and that's your Clemson Tigers. They have big time expectations this year, entering the season as the ACC favorite at plus 145. Potential playoff team. We'll get into everything for this team from their coach, Dabo Swinney, last year's recap, some of the key losses from the roster, the offense, the defense, and the schedule prediction, all in this episode in a quick 15 minutes or so for you. So when you look at this Clemson team, they enter the year at number 9 in the AP poll, led by Dabo Swinney, 161-39 record in his 15 years at Clemson. So he's won about 80.5% of his games. And he's really, over the second half, I think, of his career, has been one of the more dominant coaches in all of college football. He's won 2 national championships. He's won 8 ACC championships, and he won every one between 2015 and 2020. I think he is one of the top 5 coaches in all of college football. But he's not won a national championship since 2018, where they were kind of a mainstay in the playoffs, I believe, making it every year between 2015 and 2020. He hasn't won a national title without Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. This year, he has a new quarterback in Cade Klubnik. Will he be the next guy to return Clemson to glory? That remains to be seen. But when you look at this team from their 2022 season, to recap that, they went 11-3. They beat North Carolina in the ACC championship, but they did go on to lose to Tennessee in the Orange Bowl, where Cade Klubnik struggled there. They also lost last year at Notre Dame. They got pounded by them. I believe it was 35-14 that game. And then they lost to in-state rival South Carolina, who they've dominated historically since Dabo Swinney's got there. So this year, as I touched on at the beginning, they do enter the season as the favorite in the ACC at plus 145. But it feels like for the first time in forever, there is a serious number 2 behind them. I know that one year where Notre Dame in the COVID year played in the ACC, they were kind of right up there contending with them. But this year, like a true ACC team, it feels like that has a legitimate shot to compete with Clemson, or is neck and neck for who actually should be the favorite. It's for the first time in a while, and that's Florida State at plus 150. So Clemson is the slim favorite there over Florida State, but then the next closest team, I believe, is like plus 1,000 with Louisville and North Carolina, I believe, to win the ACC. So 2 clear top dogs in the conference. We'll also be ripping out a Florida State preview as well. But the pressure, I think, is on Dabo this year to, keep Clemson at the top of the sport and have them as that king status in the ACC. Don't let Florida State go out there, win the ACC this year, and then everyone's seeing, all right, let's get on the Florida State train now and be with them. I mean, it sounds like Florida State is trying to go to the SEC, but the SEC doesn't want them at the moment. So for the time being, they have to try and dominate the ACC and be at the top of that conference. And they're right there biting at Clemson's heels. So it's a big year, I think, for Clemson and Dabo Swinney to remain the king in the class of the sport. Because as we saw, of the ACC, as we saw with Alabama and Georgia, that tide has kind of turned. No pun intended there, but Georgia is now the king of the SEC, king of college football, and it wasn't too long ago that it was Alabama. You had that 1 year of LSU in there in 2019. But Clemson's been up there at the top of the ACC for so long. Florida State could kind of flip those fortunes now and be at the top if they do find a way to go out there and have a really strong year and win the ACC. When you look at last year's roster, some key guys that departed, they had 6 players drafted, 2 undrafted free agents, one being Joseph Nada at receiver and as well as their kicker. Those were undrafted guys. But the key guys that were really the mainstays on this Clemson roster that got drafted last year were both up front on the defensive line, and Brian Brisset and Miles Murphy. 2 key guys, and then their quarterback from last year, DJU, he transferred to Oregon State. He had a really up and down career. He filled in really nicely while Trevor Lawrence had COVID, but then once he became the full-time starter, did not really perform that well. So he's now at Oregon State. He transferred out, and that has opened the door for transitioning into the offense now and what it's going to look like for this team, for Cade Klubnik to be the full-time starter. He replaced DJ in the ACC championship against North Carolina en route to a 39-10 win, I believe it was. And then he started in the Orange Bowl, but he really struggled there against Tennessee. So he gets a full season, under his belt, and now he'll get the full chance to be the starter. Klubnik's a former 5-star guy. He's been just flat out given the keys to the offense, but he's benefited this offseason, and I think he'll benefit this upcoming season probably more than any new starting quarterback in all of college football. And that's because Clemson went out and made arguably the biggest assistant coaching hire of the offseason when Dabo fired their offensive coordinator last year and brought in Garrett Riley, Lincoln Riley's little brother, and last year's coordinator at TCU. So Klubnik is a guy that a five-star kid out of Texas, more known for his arm than his legs, but he does have legs as well to do some damage with on the ground and create. Garrett Riley really elevated Max Duggan's game last year. Duggan wasn't even the starting quarterback for TCU at the beginning of the season, and he took Max Duggan all the way to New York to be one of the Heisman finalists, and he brought TCU to the national title last year. You give Garrett Riley a much more talented player in Cade Klubnik. I mean, we saw just what Lincoln Riley has done with extremely talented quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, and now Caleb Williams as well at USC. The Lincoln Riley, Garrett Riley offense, whatever we're going to most likely be referring to it as one day, really just elevates the play of quarterbacks and really helps them benefit. So it wouldn't be surprising to see Klubnik's name up there in contention for the Heisman, but he's got a lot of pressure on him, and he needs to have a big year to kind of bring Clemson back to that college football royalty type conversation after missing the college football playoff 2 years in a row now, and then they back-to-back years they've lost 3 games. But Cade Klubnik really, I think, benefits from having arguably the best offensive player in the entire ACC and probably one of the top 5 offensive players in all of college football in Will Shipley. He is the most diverse, all-around type player, I think, in the entire ACC, potentially the country. I mean, last year he earned 3 spots on the first team all ACC. He earned first team at running back, first team at all-purpose back, and first team at return specialist. So Cade Klubnik is more than equipped with a talented guy to count on at the backfield, whether it's in the running game or just dink and dunk passes, splitting him out wide. Will Shipley is the college version of Christian McCaffrey, and then you have Phil Maffa in the backfield behind him as well. That forms the best 1-2 punch in the running back room in the ACC. And Will Shipley really is a candidate for the ACC Offensive Player of the Year. I wouldn't say the Heisman just because it's such a dominated quarterback award anymore, but he should be in contention for that ACC Offensive Player of the Year. I know that's probably Drake May or Jordan Travis and potentially even Klubnik's award to lose. But if Will Shipley goes out there and has a 1,800 all-purpose yards season, 20 touchdowns or so, and Clemson finds himself in the playoff and it's really on the back of Will Shipley, I wouldn't be surprised to see him take home that trophy this year. The receivers on this offense and the pass catchers are a bit of a question mark, and it's kind of confusing because not too long ago, this team was viewed as wide receiver U, whether it was Sammy Watkins, Mike Williams, guys like that. Then it kind of transitioned into Alabama, LSU, and now it's really Ohio State's kind of thing. But the wide receiver spot was so dominant for them. Even Hunter Renfrow, throw him in there as well, was such a dominant position group, and now it's a pretty big question mark. So we'll see if Garrett Riley is able to kind of elevate the play of the guys around him, because it's not like they haven't been recruiting well. Clemson historically under Dabo Swinney has been one of the better recruiting teams in the country. It's just in terms of getting the most out of these players, and it could have to do with the lack of quarterback play from DJ over the past 2 years. So it's up to Klubnik, I think, to elevate the play of the guys behind him. Antonio Williams at receiver could be the guy. He led the team last year with 600 yards receiving. He's their slot receiver. But behind him, there's plenty of room for people to step up and plenty of passes to go around. So they really need a true alpha type guy to step up and be the main number 1 receiver for them. I think that it would really benefit if they can have a guy like Antonio Williams step up and play that Quentin Johnson type role from Garrett Riley and TCU's offense last year, be that featured main number 1 receiver and kind of have the offensive passing game go through you. As I was touching on, I think Will Shipley is going to get a shit ton of touches this year and probably will lead the entire country, I think, in all-purpose touches. I don't think that's too far out of the realm to expect So this offense should run through Shipley, but they do need some guys to step up in the passing game. And then the offensive line, not the greatest unit, but not the worst unit. I think they're kind of a middle of the tier for these title contenders. They're not up there with the Penn States, the Michigans, the Notre Dames as some of these elite offensive lines. But when you do have a young and unexperienced quarterback, you would like a better offensive line. So it is important to kind of keep Cade Klubnik upright and give him the necessary time to complete those passes and get the confidence going and not be a turnover type guy. We transition to the defensive side of the ball now, a unit that I'm more optimistic about than the offense. I think this defense is loaded from the number 1 guy to the number 30 guy, however many players Clemson's going to throw out there on defenses here. This defense is going to be insane this year, I think, and they should be one of, if not the best defense in the country. A lot of podcasts throughout these previews I've talked about, whether it's Ohio State, Texas, USC. I've talked about how so many of these teams are going to have such good offenses. They're just going to need the defense to be just good enough, just not absolutely abysmal to allow them to win games. I think it's the opposite with Clemson. The defense is going to be so good. Garrett Riley should be able to elevate the offense, as we touched on. Cade Klubnik should be an upgrade at the quarterback spot. But the offense, I don't think, will be as explosive as some of these other top-tier teams. And the defense is going to be so good. The offense can't be putting the defense in tough spots and shooting themselves in the foot with self-inflicted wounds and turnovers by Klubnik and the rest of the offense. That can't happen, I think, if Clemson wants to make it back to the playoff this year. Everything that I've read and heard about this Clemson defense throughout the offseason is the depth up front on the defensive line is just insane. And their second unit would most likely start at every other school in the country, not named Alabama and Georgia. That's how good this defensive front and how deep it is. And I think that's just going to pay major dividends as the season goes on, as they're able to continually rotate guys and not count on guys to be out there playing 85, 90% of the snaps each and every week. The best player, though, on this defensive front for this Clemson Tigers defense might be a guy that's not even played a snap for them yet, and that's Peter Woods, who coaches and teammates have just ranted and raved about this entire offseason. He's the prized recruit from their 2023 class, and he should be a fixture in the rotation from day one. He sounds like a guy that's going to be hard to keep off the field. So keep an eye out for Peter Woods, a guy that could play, that's going to play mostly on the interior of the defensive line, but could also kind of shuffle outside at times as well, as I think. But he's a legitimate candidate to be like the defensive rookie of the year. He probably should be that guy. Does he get enough snaps and statistics to get that award out of the ACC? That remains to be seen, just because of how good they are going to be up front. But he's going to be a game wrecker from day one, and I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table. The stars on this defense, though, for Clemson are in the middle at the linebacker spot with Jeremiah Trotter Jr. and Barrett Carter. That's the best 1-2 punch at linebacker in the nation. Those two cats are going to be two of the top 50 players most likely next year in the NFL draft if they decide to come out. Just an absolute star-studded duo. Both can rush the passer. Both are great in the run, and they're both pretty good in pass coverage as well. So those two are really the beating hearts of this defense, and I think as well as they play is really as well as this Clemson defense will play. Tyler Davis, another strong guy, returning up front to that defensive line room. And then the secondary, two guys to watch out for from what I've heard. Nate Wiggins at corner and Andrew Mabuka at safety. Those are the two guys to keep an eye out for. Clemson has had some really good players throughout the years under Dabo Swinney in the secondary spot. And I think these are kind of the next two guys to step up and be those next big-time players for Dabo Swinney's defense. The defense, I think, is as good as it's been since Clemson last made the playoff back in 2020, and they should have them competing for the ACC crown again. This should be the unit that really drives the team. I think the offense just has to be sustainable enough. They're going to have to most likely have a few games where they're going to need to put up some points, score in the 30s, but as long as the defense holds up their end of the bargain and is as dominant as I think they can be, the offense should be serviceable enough to have this team in playoff contention again. All right, we will go to the schedule prediction now, the time that we've all been waiting for, the beef up front. Clemson schedule prediction. 1 second while I share my screen. I have this Clemson team going 11-1 in the regular season. I'll start it off with this first game, Labor Day weekend on Monday night against Duke, is not going to be a cupcake. Duke football last year went 9-4, under the radar a little bit. Mike Elko in his first year as as the head coach, former defensive coordinator at Texas A&M, and quarterback Riley Leonard. They really put Duke football kind of back on the map last year and really made a name for themselves. That's not going to be a cupcake of a game. Clemson is a 13-point favorite in that one, but watch out for Duke at home in that one. The lone game on Monday night, everyone's going to be watching. Pressure will be on, and that'll probably be the most, I think, attended Duke football game probably within the past decade to 15 years. It should be an awesome game, but I do have Clemson finding a way to win that game. Have them beating Charleston Southern. FAU is going to be an improved team under Tom Herman. We'll have them winning that game. This is the lone loss, though, I have. I know it's at home, but I'm all in on Florida State this year. And the big thing with me is the experience of Florida State. They're coming into Clemson on this day, where Clemson, this is going to be, I know I kind of talked about that Duke game, but this game is the big one. This is probably one of the 10 most anticipated games on the college football schedule for the season, and it's going to be Klubnik's first major game as a starting quarterback. He came in last year in the ACC championship. He played that game against Tennessee in the Orange Bowl, but this is huge. Like, this is the Super Bowl of the regular season, I guess you could say, the biggest game of the regular season for Clemson and Florida State. I know Florida State has that LSU game, but the conference game is much more important. So I do have Jordan Travis and Florida State and that really experienced bunch going down to Clemson, up to Clemson, and finding a way to win that football game. I think it could be an instant classic. But after that, I have Clemson beating Syracuse, Wake Forest, Miami, NC State. I do have them knocking off Notre Dame at home in that one, Georgia Tech, North Carolina, and then I do have them beating South Carolina. I think North Carolina and South Carolina back-to-back. Those are two dynamic offenses, I think, this year. Could be tough, but like I've touched on time and time again about this Clemson Tiger team, the defense is going to be super good, and I think they'll really carry them. So I have Clemson going 11-1 this year, and that should put them back into the playoff, into the ACC title game, because ACC is not doing division, so it's just going to be the two best records out of the conference. So it most likely will be Clemson and Florida State matching up, because it's Clemson at plus 145, then it's FSU at plus 150, and then it's plus 1,000 Louisville and plus 1,000 UNC. Like, these are the clear-cut top two teams. I just am valuing the experience of Jordan Travis in Florida State over Cade Klubnik and his lack of experience truly in these big-time games. I think that's the major difference between some of these major college football teams and others this offseason. It's a reason why I'm really high on Notre Dame with Sam Hartman. Jordan Travis in Florida State, experience. J.J. McCarthy in Michigan, experience. When you look at Georgia, Carson Beck, first-time starter. Ohio State, whether it's Devin Brown or Kyle McCord, first-time starter. Alabama, not sure who's playing quarterback for them, but not much big game experience. A lot of inexperience at the top here in college football at the quarterback spot. Cade Klubnik at Clemson. You look at more experience in the regular season. By season's end, it could be a completely different story. If those two teams meet up in the ACC title game again, Klubnik will have a full season of starting under his belt, playing in big games, having to perform in clutch moments. Could they get their revenge? Possibly, but for regular season's sake, I'm going to take Florida State over Clemson in that game. So that is the beef up front. Clemson Tiger football preview for the 2023 season. We will have one more episode coming out, breaking down those Florida State Seminoles a little bit more in depth. But thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk soon.